going to do the recording. Oh, great. Okay.
Everybody knows that. Yeah. Okay, well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. I hope you're all doing well. And my name is Stephen Salmoni. I'm a member of the board of directors for POG, and I'll be the MC for this evening, your virtual MC. And thank you for joining us. And we're happy to welcome Laura Jaramillo and Saba Sayed Razvi. I said that right? I've just met Laura and Saba. I know you for a while, and I'm so glad you're both here. I think this is a great pairing. One of the nice things about POG readings is that we bring people together who haven't maybe read before, and there's always this synergy and these wonderful discoveries that happen through the reading, and I think we'll see that this evening. I know that having readings over Zoom was a practice that was born out of unfortunate and difficult necessity, but I like it. I'm glad we're still doing it, because we get to bring you guys into our homes here. And so have people from everywhere. So thank you for that. Before I turn the virtual podium over to Charles, who'll do the introductions, we have a couple of usual announcements and business stuff. First, we'd like to thank the following organizations and groups for their support. So Arizona Commission on the Arts, Czechs Press, and for their consistent support over the years, the U of A Poetry Center, the U of A English Department, and Arizona Quarterly. We'd also like to thank our many individual patrons and sponsors for their generous contributions. We would not be able to do any of this without your guys' help. And I know too, there are any number of nonprofits, not only literary, but everything that are hurting and that need our support, and that you're here, and if you'd help us, that's just amazing. We have a website, pogartstucson, all one word, .org, and you can visit the website, and there's a place to click, right? Click your chain. Click where you can become a patron for 100 or a sponsor for 50 or anything that you would be able to donate. We'd be so grateful to you. I'd like to announce 2 more upcoming readings. This coming Saturday, November 23rd, 7 to 9 p.m., Pierre Joris, Nicole Parafit, and me as the local reader, which is kind of, I'm terrified to read with the 2 of them, but that'll be at the Wave Archive, 197 East Toole Avenue, Tucson, Arizona, again, 7 to 9. And that will be also recorded on YouTube for our channel if you can't make it. And then on Saturday, December 7th, also 7 to 9, Jamie McCarty, Sarah Rosenthal, and Valerie Witt at the 326 Gallery, which Charles and they were just talking about. That's the space that they have, 326 South Wilmot Road, also here in Tucson. Maybe we could put the YouTube channel link in the chat at some point on our website as well. At the conclusion of the reading, we'd like to invite everybody to come back and speak and have a Q&A and just hang out a little bit more and talk to the poets and see what we want to say. And lastly, 2 statements from us and for all of us as a community. POG intends to be an inclusive, supportive, and most importantly, a safe space for everyone. If anyone should feel otherwise, please do reach out to one of our directors, and please raise your hands, anybody who's a director, and John and Zoe and Paula as well. And POG would also like to acknowledge the indigenous peoples of all the lands that we call home. Tucson, where POG is based, is the ancestral home of the Tohono O'odham and Pascua Yaqui nations. We ask that we please take this moment to reflect on how, in the wake of a history of violence and dispossession, we can move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration.
Thank you.
And thank you for John. That's John's beautiful statement for our land development. Thank you for that. So, Charles, if you want to go ahead, turn the whole.
Okay. One thing I would love to just say about both of these readers tonight is that at a time when we need so many new ideas and voices which are anything but the standard, anything but complacent, we have that tonight in speakers who approach this world with a great deal of critique, but also a great deal of wonder, I think. And I'm just happy that these 2 are together here. I think Laura's reading first. That's
sure. Yeah.
Where I have these intros.
I just got your email like a few minutes ago. Yes, I can read first.
Okay. Laura's both poet and critic. She was born in Queens, New York, to Colombian parents and now lives in Durham, North Carolina. Her books include Material Girl, Making Water, from some great presses, Sub Press and Future Poem. She holds a PhD in critical theory from Duke University, and she co-runs the North Carolina-based reading and performance series Paradiso. And I think, oops, got to get back to where I was. Here we go. I had a real privilege in reading with her. I guess it was just last spring. Seems like a long time since last spring in New York City in the Segway series, and I was just so glad to be able to contact her, invite her to read for POG. So please welcome Laura Jaramillo.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you so much to Charles for inviting me, and thank you so much to POG and all the organizers of this. It's really nice to meet a new public, a new group of people, and also put some faces to names that I had heard of before, but would not have been able to identify people. But yeah, I'm actually just primarily gonna read from my last book, which is called Material Girl, and I'm just gonna say a few things about the book before I read it. Or no, not Material Girl, sorry, Making Water, not Material Girl. Material Girl is my first book. Making Water is, it was published 2 years ago, and it sort of roughly takes place between like 2012 and 2018. So it's very much about the post-Occupy moment, and about the 2010s, and which was like, my work is also like heavily autobiographical, so it's also very much about my life. But I'm just, I'm really interested in the places where history intersects with the personal, which, I mean, I guess all poetry is to a certain extent, but sometimes you have to say it. So I'm just gonna start. Quarry. There's a will to drown consumer electronics that's distinct from revolution. Local kids smoke spliffs and cliff jump the quarry. To have perhaps re-encountered yourself in anger, natural as infancy in water. It doesn't smell, so somehow circulates quietly through generosity and impermanence, against the law, which is summer. There really is no discernible bottom. They describe people they desired as present or so present. Edged by jagged rocks and slime, the middle is sun traversing evening water. A pat description of beauty is that which cannot last. This empire's lumber is sadness, saplings and weed. Afternoon's boredom, bodily anarchy. The Eno winds through landlocked towns to loop around the empire of mosquitoes. Hang a right at Sitgo. To say she's present really means everyone else is just not really there. The thereminic cry of girls before they hit the water, grind with their granite lichens to sand. Light scatters through the canopy as a disco ball throws light. Lost for a time in the abstract forest of your name, leave me now in the head holler. Skinny and taut, bronze and brown, ringlets heavy with lake, one narrates the spiritual properties of meth. Profane words brush the thinkable. Communion quick becomes some other rite, now with bodies rent. Water flips the sky's axis, the wild stars of diving, and no sound. 2 of them were fucking in the lake, and I thought it wasn't real because you couldn't spangle your body in this mud with mine. To live utterly in the airy realm of things and see with borrowed eyes. I've never liked anything more than time, the rites of spring in the strip mall parking lot. What flesh can do in masses with a violet day through the slats, a tendency to float derealized above the afternoon, bodies on the gravel. People ask if in America we eat only hamburgers, dust that traverses the sun's rays down to its depth. Worn rope swing hung from ever younger quaking aspens. She swings off in defiance. The boys applaud a latent desire to be the lone woman among men, dimly recognized in the heavy heat, undivided, the one of us who won, not split. Everything I know is fragments swimming off into the private world of women. This next poem is called Autoimmunity. Did you take the narcissistic parent's hand? The form should contain everything to contain totality. I said, yeah, you trade the hell of winter there for this hell of summer here. The mind cannot picture a Chiliagon's 1,000 sides. Last night we met the nicest guy high on crack at Kroger. Frost killed the organics. Failure not visible on body's surface yet. She picked up a small magazine called Time Cuts Us into Pieces. Autoimmunity. What difference is there to a blind man between one making water and one bleeding in silence? I urinated 19 times Tuesday. A woman encounters a cockroach.
Here in the back there, we kind of have this.
Sorry.
Oh, it's what difference is there to a blind man between one making water and one bleeding in silence? I urinated 19 times Tuesday. A woman encounters a cockroach and knows being. Consumed 1,300 calories. Beauty is no small part. Simulated care sunk in the circulatory system to listen like babies, pink and swaddled, alone and far away. The velvet lather of voices automated against your aura, performed for other strangers who can't sleep. So many years I wanted anyone at all to touch my face. A language in which still life means dead nature. Time-lapse video traces peaches in a bowl from decay to dust, to too often catch the weft of life woven through bleeding since I was 25 and friends began to die. Friendship's liquidity. The first prohibition is touch, the savage din made by her knees moving under spandex in the yard. Under her uniform skirt hitched up beneath the senses, after a soccer ball. The birds sing at night, unbearable and real. Hematology. When you'd thought bone was the fundament, a year of infections. Announcing the presence of water, steam rises off pavement. In the throat, a hitch locates the circulatory sigh of prone bodies breathing in time together. I write devastation in lieu of vomiting in your mouth, having been at all times the recipient and the perpetrator. Time is water traversing bones, a moment of internal silence, impossible. The heart is an audible presence then. Bile, liquid, viscera, half liquid, plasma, semi-liquid, and I'm so fucking thirsty. Because the intellect is sometimes obscured by passion or disease or sleep. A girl-brained body embroidered with hormones and sweat will escape utility. Let this account of what imagination is and why it is suffice. This poem is called Bad Magic, and it's set in the city of Philadelphia. Her heart broke at the ugliness of the city as she approached it over the bridge. He left 2 years later. We left 3 years before. I will never return and have never left. Dreams are parallelisms alongside holding facilities and row homes. I return. I sold most of my books. The city will forget my face tomorrow. The sins of a dreamer are never more than this. You felt nostalgia for the unknown university. You just wanted to make your living in an ugly town. You willed to walk the streets, head crowned with fugitive thought. No longer quite young, you appear to yourself as a photograph, and the bad magic of images fails you. Having never known your beauty as a breathing being, a desolation appears to engulf you. The city's mirage walking hungry on wind-cutting streets. I will never be so alone again as I was then, and it aches. All of history, the story of its retraction, the squats and encampments taken over by the knifey glamour of filial names and economics, the ecstasy of class and mirrored display. If the storage unit throws our clothes and our letters in the trash, let us not live in remembrance of them. Give it up for space transmuted into time. By year 3, memory will become imagination tall as loblolly pines. Yellow Schwinn Collegiate stolen. It's coming, it's going in waves. So happy that day drinking Carlo Rossi at the Latvian Cultural Center with poets I no longer know who I was in love with or who loved me then besides my mother, though at 23, that had been the metronome. Time is a melancholy sign system. Money is a melancholy sign system. I'm gonna go forward in the manuscript. This is set in New York. Lacrimosa. East Coast rentals carry those Florida plates bearing orange blossoms, vermilion and white, abundant promise in the land of eternal night. Old immigrants buoyed on prosperity of car dealerships, prosperity of delis, prosperity of dry cleaners. Cities of the East mortgaged to meanness and ice, a whole life and its ways expires without witness. To make it to Nassau from East New York blackout in 77 during the riots, they were stealing tables, making worlds, and he defining what Puerto Rican, Sicilian, brown skin wasn't in the dark said, how we the whites train our dogs. Slowly, Spanish is extinguished from their feelings. Ice cream pints stowed in Chevy's trunk, wrapped in blankets, selling to bodegas in the boroughs, driven against potholes and chemical gales, blown off Newtown Creek, managing a strip club at the edge of Corona. Little plaster angel hung on the door, cast his eyes down at us, the way shag carpet devours light and sound. Bore the surname Romano, sun-baked commoner in the empire's southern leg. Bore this ordinariness not as the soul of dispossession, but as the root of the normal. Abandoned rap CD bakes out in cash-bleached suburban sunshine, white as right to brittle coarsening. The double face of Gemini spits in the eye of sadness, then folds in on itself, never to be known. But we admired Hendrix's moves like a flaming oil slick on the sea, his lights sliding and sparking against electric frame. Anointed king of the clan by the sweat of his brow, sit out on a folding chair getting umber in the sun. The same classic rock that was never classic with the subwoofers on. Why won't you come to him with your problems? By now, the whole coast tangle of glittering traffic mortgaged time to nothingness. When you became an invalid, you saw for the first time the world reflected in the dog's lachrymose eye. We look out the Amtrak window over the dun-colored lake to see it perfectly mirror the dun-colored sky. Carolina mold nestled quietly in the folds of our garments. And a swarming kinetic force goes out of this world. Because my feelings are a harp of ether, I came home to rest the day he resigned. Flesh is against us. He replaced the shape of his form in the universe with the word Christmas. I kept thinking time is reversible. She said they lay down new carpet only in the spot where it happened. Telluric cycles of feast say time is renewed, flesh is renewed, he is risen again, but this isn't it. The skull's architecture, blown over blankets in precise fragments. No love for the broken body in the cult of man, which would fit together as a jigsaw in some time-killing object. What did that mean? When is the time to die? In the arms of my imagination, a pietà where I talked to him, feet wrapped in clean gauze, carefully wound by the hands of women. We washed each, inheriting accidentally another world in that process, where men's hearts wither leprously. If we lacked them, we were born already our own fathers. If the matter of the broken body persisted in the oyster-colored light, it was because he had risen and was laughing, wearing sunglasses, insisting like a bandaged zombie Lazarus. It was a joke. Do the women dress you now in purple raiments and greet you at the threshold in the morning, washing your feet? They tell you to go down into that deep witnessing, and the whole edifice, incoherence of self, splays out and resists. I'll tell you, mourning is nothing and boredom. By January, I had become the soul of New Year, connecting vomit and tinsel through negative space. Just that, nothing. Clapperless lead bell affixed to the lung. Time reveals its true face in ambient footfall of dogs howling across the neighborhood, away from idea, towards song. No one wants to be nothing, and no one wants to be nowhere, and yet we are dislocations, incidentally cut with experience. Gliding empty on and off exit ramps, almost in the middle of my life, still a student with no more than $1 in my pocket, I've refused so much for sunny investments in beauty or memory. I'm going to read 2 more poems. My poems are long, sorry. This poem is called War Machine. So much purple asleep in the green of the sea, luminous Carolina sky crossed with cumulus cotton balls. Colors recoil when military choppers blow back water's first 10 veils. Today, no planes circulate above Ferguson, Missouri. Edge of vomit, edge of everything. They were wrapping light around their bodies and shitting in the water. Spraying sunscreen into the atmosphere because my not body replaces my torso with air, and the war machine's contours are becoming in the honeyed light. Heavens rent with metal, sand kaleidoscopic beneath us. Swimmers applaud, beckoning the machines into the water. The special violence from which we suffer goes all pink and green, holographic in the evening sun. That all of existence could be a pleasure palace, that all of survival could be a boot to the neck of the other. Our time and orchestra heard in the distance, sinking. We were so beautiful that day, all consumer metaphysics and pink meat ribboned with phosphorescent fat. I took 37 pictures of myself in the back seat to make sure I still existed. Animals on the road petrify when light hits their eyes. Let your body go like water, the car revolving our airborne forms, leaves and mud revolving the car, floating in silence with its terror and force through the sinews. She understood then that incoherence as dying, splayed through that violent will to live. Furiously, the drone is a whale with no face. There are frequencies inside the chest that hum in absolute fear, and it moves as a mantis moves, cutting air with its not animal countenance. Pterodactyl circle and cacti hiss, edge of vomit, edge of everything. Heat maps mark the movement of blood-bearing bodies across desert sand. The operators open their interfaces ribbed with fire, tipped in blood. The men pull over to peek over the side of a ditch crew cut and rosy. The men disappointed were not hurt, wanting to have been heroes or at least become the one holding the terror and force, the fire and percussive blowback, the shrapnel and tie cuffs, the paperwork of modernity. The men perform ice operations at the Spawn Ranch, at Aravaca, at Tabernas. They'll fake out a frontier in the desert of the real if they have to, abide by some basic banality to serve, then oil the contours of their physiques. The one man with such a Barbie-like arc in his tit pectoral muscle, the technological veil, pneumatic, virtually weightless, Kevlar, condemned to bear the melancholy of RoboCop's sensuous pink lip. The pilots rip open a breach in being becoming war gods in a sky from which the regular gods have retracted to rend the veil of women only to conceal their own faces, so they may never witness themselves being seen by their marks. And then I'm just going to read one of the poems that concludes the book, which is called Some Rain, which is kind of inspired by a Robert Creeley poem. But I feel that I'm sort of like against Creeley in this poem. The drug wanes, and we're tiny animals with huge hearts in our absurd chests, racing against sleep, against the circulatory bang bang pressed together. Many Sundays pass into winter, and no one knows what is a marriage. Our windows and doors will be so fat with moisture by May. I inhale a mutual dust. The cat's mammal need to be hailed from the next room, lest he keep yowling with lights on. Your name is an event that happens in sound, not words. Waiting for recognition. Assure me I'm an image in your head holler. To breathe into this hole where I could write what it is to be beside you. I will not write like him to be wet with a decent happiness, but approximate. Our hearts will transform. They will not stay still. Happiness is never decent. No one should know what is a marriage, what images hold us in light of other images, which are just ideas, what is time in which to languish and reappear, what is the perfect trouble with which all images are veined, which our bodies will live in the light of for life, which like water runs before all sense, what is grace against which we brush as images against other images in the black light of memory, a velvet poster, a map of what has been remembered as what will be, which is false and fails to make an image of the world so radiant and violent, the world whose light is breaking and scattered like our limbs across the beach, the pieces, all the light which you collect for me at night. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I think you.
Please still on mute.
Am I still on mute? Okay. I love what you did with the Creeley poem in that moment, actually. Okay, well, moving on, and oops, part of my I had a blip on my computer while that happened, and my whatever script I had on Saba disappeared from my screen as well as other things. So let me just say, Saba Razvi is a professor in English at University of Houston, Victoria. She is the author of several books, including a chapbook I was so happy to do at Czech Express, Limerence and Lux, but also books from Finishing Line and I forget the other press.
Agape editions.
Agape Editions, yes. When we were colleagues and faculty members together in Victoria, Texas, one of the things that a few of us started, and including Saba, was a series of events. You know, fortunately, I wasn't there long enough, but they were called Meet the Poet for audiences that didn't necessarily know much of anything about poetry. So we had figures like Rumi and William Blake, and we
James
slipped
Joyce.
somebody in like Hilda Doolittle, HD. And the thing I learned about Saba is she, of course, knows everything about all these poets and could participate in anything, even sometimes at the drop of a hat. So she has, I think, an encyclopedic knowledge of poetry, in part, you know, through her education in Texas and at University of Southern California, where she received a PhD, and but also through just an incredible thirst to learn and to know not only about this art, but about this art's intersection with the world, which of course is what Laura's talking about, the personal meets the historical, the evidential world. And so it has been a great pleasure for now, I suppose it's like a decade almost to know Saba Razvi and to follow her work. And it's my pleasure to welcome her here tonight. Saba.
Thank you for such kind words, Charles. I really appreciate the fact that we all worked together and had this incredibly special time at UHV for a while. It's a rare thing to work with people who love art and life and humanity. And I really enjoyed everything that we did together with poetry, with events, with painting, and all the stuff that came out of it. And I'm so glad to know you guys, and I'm so glad to be here with all of you today. And POG is wonderful, so I feel really honored to be here. I'm going to start with a poem from Limerence and Lux that Charles just mentioned, because this chapbook always brings me joy. Cynthia painted this, Charles created this, and I got to see some of this come together and fall in absolute love with seeing the words show up on the page so differently from how I normally engage with them, which is scribbling on something. I'm very much an analog person, and if you put it in the digital space, I forget that it exists, just in general in life. And I think that's something that's kind of been on my mind a lot in the past few years and coming up in the things I write about. And so um, I I think I walk through the world mostly half in love with it and half in horror at what it chooses to be. And I'm always drawn to this space between nightmare and dream. Over the past few years, I'm thinking a whole lot more about how we connect the things that are our experiences of the sensual world into narratives, in particular, how we name them, how we situate them, and how we place them. And so I'm drawn today to read a little bit from here first, and then um, from this collection, which I haven't read from in quite some time, but which seems really relative, and I'll talk a little bit about relevant, and I'll talk a little bit about why. But this one is called Dream with Astrolabe and Compass. And though I wrote it before the pandemic, I came back to revisit it and think about it after the pandemic. Amitava Kumar is a novelist who described the last time he experienced a Trump presidency as a time when he wanted to hide in his world and be in lockdown. And he talked a little bit about how he feels called to do that again. And it made me think a little bit about interiority, exteriority, and how we contend with those things. And that's something that I think comes up in this poem. I loved, Laura, the fact that your poems are long. I love long poems. I always write really short, dense poems, but I love listening to long poems. So I'll give you the opposite. Dream with Astrolabe and Compass. I filled my house with bird cages, antique, and lamps, tall iron, and bits of bamboo assembled into sculptures for the seeding of some light. Drawing closed all the shutters, I waited for a luminescence that did not come. I wrapped my darkness in a shroud and shrouded the nascent suns one by ones, and longed for the moon to emerge from the vetiver of dreams filled with stones and green men and rockets in path fixed, and the sense that light could come from any of those distant radiant points or from inside that darkness. I shuttered and shuddered and waited until the darkness yielded night and constellations of something distant enough and extinct enough and dead enough to tolerate. There, Zubin el-Janubi. There, the Eagle's Head, supernova. There, Zubin Eskamali. There, the Heart's Nebula. A safe distance away, and its crimson, and its nostalgia, far enough away to break open 1,001 pinpricks of light, and land as nothing but dust, coating the fabrics, filling my house, some direction for a needle unaccustomed to aligning. And so I'm thinking a lot about places and language and names and people and technology. And technology and the world sometimes are in a very strange kind of clash. But a period of time when that was really significant in my mind is around 850, when the brothers Musa wrote the book of ingenious mechanical devices. And it was a collection of engineering marvels, designs that they had come up with to look at how the world functions. And the world right now is in a place much like what it was like after 9/11, where people who look a lot like me are not really looked upon with a lot of favor sometimes. And I'm interested in how there's that disconnect between how some knowledges and languages come forth and some don't. So these two poems are references to and drawn from the Book of Ingenious Devices. They're both palimpsests. And this is from Beside the Muazzin's Call and Beyond the Harem's Veil. And it's a little collection which kind of tries to look at the contributions of Muslim life in the world beyond the word terrorism. So this poem is called Chrysopoeia and Isagogy, and it deals with alchemy, and it's in 5 parts, in 5 sections, and I'll read you 2 of them. And they look like this. So these 2. Palimpsest of an entry for the Book of Ingenious Devices. The brothers of the House of Wisdom built a book, 1,001 less 1 by 10, and the brothers of the House of Wisdom built devices, and a page on how to use them. The brothers of the House of Wisdom built a hero or a philo or a system of control. The brothers of the House of Wisdom built a pneumatic valve. What use would you have for a pneumatic valve or engineering among the 8th century sands? But in the works of the hand of the once Vitruvian man is the power that doesn't need reason to reason. The brothers of the House of Wisdom built a trick of the mind, a vessel moving water out of time, a fountain in a flower of tin, feathers, a shapeshifter in the wind, a musical box with a flute and a claw, a gas mask for covering the face. The brothers of the House of Wisdom built a trick of the mind and wonder. What wonder can we find in a sand and cattled land, beside frontiers and borders, where the house carries the memory of the ranks of color, unmoored, unmoved with the movement of time? The brothers of the House of Wisdom built what I will call nothing but a book of tricks, and you are not the color of wisdom I will recognize. The brothers of the House of Wisdom built a book by which you made a gauge to give us time and wonder, but I will not read by it or give your light any other word than dark to be given back to darkness. But the brothers of the House of Wisdom built a book in the book, devices to dazzle the movement of wit and time, water, shadow, fire. And then number 3, palimpsest of technical drawings from the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices. And these are describing actual devices that were in the book. So if you get a chance to look at it and it's marvelous drawings, I recommend doing so. Peacock Flame, Monk Child, Song of Fountain and Light. The sacred letter is a song of any scribe, sound and sense bound in the simplest strokes, graceful turn and punishing constraint, but the sense and the sensing bound at once. The sacred stone is a shape, a displacing clay, a geometry of material that shadows the light. The shifting of the numbers of the stone and tree, the rhizomes offering to algae and ant, and the slivers of those shapes make up the faces of edifices of the sacred, where may be seated the songs of the pious, bearing the lettered lingering of the mewling, guttering wish of the pit of navel, and the curve of the nape of the neck curving skyward. The shape, repeating, is a structure. The structure of bone is a cathedral, a temple, a mosque, a library, a rosary on which to count the many sins of the sacred and the unsacred, and the scared are simpler to reach by song. And if the song is kept in keyed tin, and fountains opening at the mooring of the peacock's ominous throaty warble, a portent to slip open, a pocket or a portal to the rivers of the garden, like the rivers extinguishing a small flame borne by a tin monk bearing in his lap a child, lifting a cup to the shore of tin bridged on the other side. The letter letters the world letters the sound letters the name, and the name is the song of being and light. And what of the words curling like henna on the body, ink lovely tattoos on the body's walls, and the body is the building of a sacred space now lettered with words that unsing the spoilt song of a screen-built homeland, or the ruins of a hand-bricked wall, walling the gardener from gardens of orange and olive grove, from rivers and sunny land. Where does the land dip open and fold? Where is the tongue's taste for petal and leaf? Where will the mountain's path lead? And to write those many names with light, hues of neon and electricity, ephemeral as breath, is to say that the word is a world of words, world-lead and world-weary, and wearing the sacred songs, the stroke of the scribe there beyond, the word of the unread, velvet and ripe for the asking, and the eating, and the taking of this breath. A voice commands you to look at the letters of your dreams and read. And this poem in 5 parts ends with Rumpelstiltskin, so it really likes to meander. Take it started. I'll read another set of 3. These poems deal with Iraq, Afghanistan, some of the wars that happened over there. And it's a 3-part poem where we encounter a character that we call a dervish. He's a soldier, was once a soldier, is something else now. And there are 3 different poems. They're all a little bit different, and they came about at different times. And the first one came about at the Kundiman and Kaya Press AWP reading in Seattle, where every poet who went up read a poem that they had brought of their own, and a poem written by Bruce Lee, who was also a poet. And so it was an interesting arrangement of poems, and I didn't have one. So people kept asking me questions. I wasn't reading, I was just attending. And so I came up with this in response to some of the questions I'd received, which are mixed in with my voice. So their questions, my questions and responses. And this is called, this is from Dervish of the Restless Heart. And this is part 1, Anthem for Those Ancestors. I don't have for you a Bruce Lee poem. I don't have a poem about an elephant speaking in the voice of Ganesh. I don't have the verse that verses the fundamentalist impulse to blow shit up that you don't like. I don't have one foot in one land or one in another. I don't know the name for myself that isn't diaspora. I don't fit enough into one tongue or another. But I miss the tongue of that cowboy coming back home in a big truck still smelling of fracking and the fuel fields. I don't have for you a poem on the occasion of the owning of the race of the racists. I don't have a voice stifled for you between some unchosen veil. I don't have for you words that speak your language. I don't have for you words that say approval, not from home, nor from home away from home either. I don't have for you a poem about the nation of my name, just the sinewy sibilance of my fingers scratching out sighs on a page while I think of that good old Once Upon a Cowboy saying I don't really read such books that often, all the while reading stories on my skin, his fingers writing silence on my sun-browned sin, and my thoughts reaching out to hold his bearded face, pull his hips close to mine so that I am filled with a forgetfulness of words that I cannot name or unlearn how to say. Those places he has been, I have not. He has seen the sands that gave me my name, Kamya Makan, Kaf, and beyond. I do not have for you a poem about the nomad in my blood that knows these sand songs that I do not know how to say. Oh, tires of knots, untie my tongue, unknot what I do not have for you a poem about. Part 2 was written on the occasion of a big withdrawal of forces, US and NATO, after something like 12 years of war in Afghanistan. American Dream with Pomegranate and Horizon. In the water of the scrying bowl, strings of silver curl into the letters of some foreign alphabet, letters formed of smoke and fog, of sand and coal, palimpsests of fire, fireless flame, firefly shame, starlight and otherworldly breath, pluming in the cold of desertscapes. I dream you, fatigued in fatigues, flesh charred but intact, singed and covered in soot, but alert and alive, more stunned than bled, your eyes smiling, luminous, bright and blue as a drone-ready sky. I dream you gathering seeds in the land of pomegranates, scattering them along the mountainsides, the sandy dunes, the horizon like a lion's mane curling as the beast startles into some readied stance. And as I miss your fingers tracing the language of my lost tongue along my skin, the words I do not know bursting into lush green life inside me, fire and flame and flower petals the color of spring. I dream you safe and crossing currents of air and smoke toward an unsettled home, a waiting home, your hand scattering those gathered seeds with an open hand. And when is April like a bride in spring, the cypresses scenting the breeze? I dream that they sprout flesh along barren terrain left behind, hearts beating fruit, budding with fear and with frustration, with the anticipation of a coming storm. So that poem begins in Afghanistan and ends in Lebanon, if you'll recognize the references. And the third part, which is the last part, lovesick wanderer, O dervish of the restless heart. Whirling like the morning's salt-scented breeze over soft dunes until the sandstorm tumult in me spins out unembraced across the whole of the horizon. Whirling like the wind over stark sandy dunes until the whole of me fills the horizon. Uplifting and maddening tumult enraptured by the sun's face on every grain of time. Whirling like the rising and rising is forever forgetting of a lightless descent into arid desert embrace, sand singing the whole of me to the skeletal skein of horizon. I'll step away from those for a little bit into a different kind of horror, I suppose. AI has been coming up in conversations a great deal, especially in the language of technologies used in warfare. And language is itself a technology as well. So I've been thinking a whole lot about how those things connect. And I have a collection of poems, a manuscript. It's been ongoing for many years, which I always feel like is almost done and then isn't done, and I keep coming back to it. And it deals with artificial intelligence, and it deals with how we program a thing to know a thing that we don't necessarily know about ourselves, the world. And this is called The Acquisition of a Soul, and it uses language from Paracelsus. And I'm going to read that to you. Paracelsus on how to harvest a homunculus, or how to make a man without a woman. Big man for the little man. Let the semen of a man putrefy. The golem is dumb, but me. The golem is helpless, but for me. The golem is my unshaped form. By itself in a seal cucurbite with the highest putrefaction of the venter equinus, the golem is mudborn magic. Horse manure for 40 days, Geiger in denial and grief, gone, she is gone, foregone conclusion, she is gone, without the gong of time of the children singing, or until it begins at last to live. Meretricious, metered, emet, crying, singing, laughing, singing, wailing, gone. She is gone, but not foregone, is the gone of the begotten of the wailing wane, she is gone. Move and be agitated, which can easily be seen. The golem is met with emet, met with truth is met with death. Gone is her belly, her open and unfull belly, without the child, and the child has gone, without the children who took away where they had gone. If now, after this, it be, the golem is death, but for me, the golem is truth, dumb me. Form unshapen is shaped in unshapen form, without her is a womb unfilled, but filling it can be done. The ancients of the alembic said the womb was just a vessel. Every day nourished and fed cautiously and prudently with an arcanum of human blood. The golem, but for me, is helpless, holding what the husband giveth, gave it. Here I give to wire wains and circuit sons and gear girls the life I govern and give. It becomes thenceforth a true and living infant. Write my name in his mouth, paper his tongue with me, programmed by the tongue from my mouth, paper me. No need for her, no gone, gone, no need for what is gone. And this conversation about technology and men and women and reproductive rights is back in the world again. So I think it's worth thinking a little bit about. I'll read just a couple more, and I'll step a little bit away from this part of the world for a minute. I have a fair bit of heritage in India, and I've been thinking a lot about the way that we talk about monsters in Asian literature, specifically South Asian literature, and how that's different from the monstrous in the European tradition, and often in what we take for granted as the American tradition, especially in the context of names and places. Uh, I think a lot about the indigenous people who have lost their homes here in this world, and you know, here in Houston, and where I live, which is called Houston or Sugarland now, there's a lot of difficult heritage connected to people being dispossessed and killed and enslaved, and treated truly horribly. And it's something that we don't get taught about in Houston in school. So you have to uncover it on your own. And it feels like multiple valences of betrayal when you discover it and learn the truth of the space you're living, or at least that's how it's felt for me. So I've been thinking of these monsters, and this poem is born out of this desire to contend with the natural and the worst parts of human nature through the supernatural. And there's a monster in Indian folklore called a churail, and she's kind of a vengeful woman who delivers what people deserve, especially men who have wronged others. And she has backwards feet, and she's part of a tradition of stories which emerge from people walking out in nature and encountering shape-shifting beings, right? So it's an accumulation of things, and they're often vengeful in nature, and that's something I've been thinking about, these monsters, lately. So a trespass upon an undead wedding, midnight procession of the churail. Deep in the jungle, even the black soil throbs like a heartbeat, hungry for what more can be spilled, for blood, for what can replace what has been siphoned into greedy mouths and hands. A bride unwilling opens her own wail like a tangled knot of branches, splitting into a darkness, a hollow where no light falls from sunless skies, high atop a palanquin woven of kindling and spiced roots. The grass rustles, silenced under marching boots. Foot falls backwards, beneath hair like shredded gowns, like silk ribbons sliced apart in plunder. Ghostly and absent, a wind from the distance, dry as sound in a bone flute or a sistrum, anxious as a hand on a taut leather skin. Unlike the lights over wet lands and river banks, the only twinkling sound is bells, a shadow deepening beneath leaf and twig, above blades sinking and rising. The parade of jinn bear their union forward, forged in metal and flame, none of which yield back to the earth the songs of the undying. They have come to gather along the path the bones of the forgotten. Rich the lingering marrow, crisp the crumble. They take a silhouette for everyone you let felled by others, come with guns to trample the borders they didn't see, to mark with their own names the cruelty hidden in the sinews of men, the parched thirst of a leer for all things green and young as mint. Heedless, in the conquest you sought your own release, from bellies grown ripe with need, from the eager squeal of nurture. Falling from branches, a shower in the cosmos, stars slipping down below the horizon, blinking free of their levity, yielding into a monstrous consequence. You knew to avoid the singing among the toads, in the changeling melody, inside the dissident susurrus of the snake. You knew not to turn your head at the sound of your name, deep in the leaves, and yet you, and now your name, drips from bloody lips beckoning you forth, waiting to empty your dreams with teeth and tongues. From beyond you, the echo of horses and howls, your forepaws fading, twisted limbs backwards, breathy, you among their number. Where you were will be a hollow, lingering across generations, a curse in the breath that once bore the guile of your face. And I'll end with this last one. It's Raguel, angel of vengeance, surveys the battle, his wings eclipsing the sun. The smoke clears, everything is dust, rubble, blood. Omens from the ancient world fill the new world with darkness. We are ashes, silent as birds falling, and scarabs crawling, and the quiver of Earth's core as stars shift their alignment. Night falls again and yet again, and the stars lend a light hidden from the other side of the moon. Comet glistening across horizons, meteors spilling like cast runes. Is this cosmic howl coming from my own bones? The call of darkness fills my limbs, renders every circle of senses hollow. My pupils, my irises, my gasping mouth, blood cell, bone marrow, vacuole. The cosmos holds all breath, and every leaf spills shadow of bubbling astral breath onto still water and still soil. The universe yields beings of wings, the angels of death and vengeance, wide enough to cloud sun, fighter jets and failed pipelines, flags in black and messianic gold. It is the shimmer of sand that sings, that holds the wail of children lost to games of scorn and power. What sleeps in sunlight awakens now in silencing shadow. Thank you.
Thanks to both of you. My goodness, what a beautiful set of readings. Almost just want to take a few minutes just to let all that stuff sit from both, and two different worlds, but there's so much to say, I think, together. We do typically do a few minutes after a reading just to have a Q&A or a conversation if everybody would like to do that. You unmute yourselves and show your picture, maybe anything anybody would want to say to either Laura or Saba.
We can't bite you through the computer.
Saba, there's so many things in there, from the monstrous to the erotic to the everyday to the mythological. But it seems like one of the connective tissues through all of it is it's very musical. Your work is very musical, and yet, it's hard for me to see it in the tradition of like a romantic lyric, because it's got so much other things in it that are finally, I mean, even if the poem seems to kind of resolve, at least sometimes, there's more in it that could ever resolve. And I love that about it. And I don't know if you could talk about your sense of music.
Yeah, I love music. I always wish that I could be more musical than I am. I have failed at many musical instruments, but I enjoy playing them just the same. And I love how we live in the world through music. I think there's music in everything that we experience. So the last poem I read was contending with issues that I see unfolding all around us, but it had a lot to do with the silence during the eclipse. We had that solar eclipse not long ago, and I wrote this during that eclipse, and it was interesting to me to hear how silent everything became, how incredibly still everything became, and to think about the connection between how different traditions and communities handle being out and about in the world in that silence. And it occurs to me often that music is a way of engaging the things that are otherwise punctuated by silence. So for me, language works this way. Colors look this way. I think of music when I paint. I think of music when I dance. I think of music all the time. And I often listen to things that people wouldn't expect me to listen to while writing. So, when I was in grad school, I had a bunch of friends over and we were hanging out and writing, and the music that happened to be in my headphones was a bunch of EDM because that's what I was interested in listening to at that moment. And they were listening to very other things and completely surprised that that's what was coming through my headphones. And so for me, music is both a presence and an absence in the world. And I think I look for it as a way of navigating all the things I can't ever answer. You can speak to so much with a song, you can speak to so much with a color, with a dream. And those things never have narratives that begin or show you where the middle is or ever end like life. Um, so I think I look for the music in living and in breathing. And it dictates what I do with what I receive. But I take it as a huge compliment that you describe things as musical. So, because I often feel like music is something I want to access but can't, so I'm always aspiring to it. So, I don't know if that answers the question, but I love music.
Well, that more than answers the question. It's beautiful. Thank you.
I think, I don't know if this is a question more than just an attempt to say something or bring a comment from raw feeling, but what you're saying about music and presence and absence and silence also seem to be coming in the through line of letters and writing. The letters at the letters the world, right? But also the ways in which these signs, these kinds of writing tend to become things, even though they're never quite realized. And I think Laura, maybe just the opposite, because I loved all the things that you had. It was your poems are so rich with stuff. And coming from Queens, I mean, I could really see very much images of my own childhood and those neighborhoods and all the different, and almost the way that things become signs in your work. That here's this beautiful constellation of stuff, and interior stuff and exterior stuff also. And I don't know what the question would be here, other than just how things and signs, things as signs and signs as things. You're both trained in theory and know something about semiotics, I guess. But
Yeah, I was really interested in and I mean this in a really positive way, the crowdedness of Saba's work, which is like actually something I really admire in general. Like I feel like when work is really like, I mean, something can even be minimalist and crowded, but like, it's like to me, like the crowdedness of like signs and symbols is like I experience it as like an intensely positive aesthetic quality. And I like, to some degree, I try to do it in my own work, but like, I just thought that was I was like really struck by the richness of reference and also like just the amount of like history and mythology that's woven into the work. And it's just like so impressive the way that you place things like sort of close together, but the way also that you like sort of run through, like you do complete the ideas, like they don't like totally run together, but it's like it's very like it's a lot of information, like very elegantly organized. And I really love that. But yeah, I'm just like a great fan of collage. And so in general, I just like think of, like there's a way that I want my poems to be like a very smooth surface. And where I don't necessarily want the collage element to be perceptible, but my method at the end of the day is just completely collage and bringing things that didn't necessarily like begin together. So yeah, that to me, there's something, there's a kinship there.
I wanted to say that I love that you commented about your poems being long because I felt myself kind of like being lost and listening in the best way. I like that, like letting your guard down. And, long poems have this like interrogatory kind of melody to me. And I so appreciate that. There's like this willingness to engage and be present in the moment and with the thing, and to confront it and not shy away from it and not like flit away from it, to stay open, that I think is really valuable in the world. And it's something that I definitely hide from. I very occasionally write long poems, but my short poems are very dense, all of them.
Mhm.
And I loved seeing the way into that conversation. Like I wanted to keep listening and keep hearing.
Yeah, no, I said that because I was like talking to someone, I gave this book to them, and they were like flipping through it and they hadn't read it yet. They were like, your poems are like long. And I was like, yeah, my poems are long. I was like, I would say that's like a defining thing. So I was just like thinking, and I was like, sometimes when I read them, I'm like, these are so long. But I also like really enjoy you never know in this world, you never know what kind of attention you're getting, like in terms of like how much people can keep up or stay with it. But I sort of I think like on one hand, it's like I want the poem to be entertaining, but I also really like sort of want to feel like, okay, a duration has passed, like something has like elapsed in the, like hopefully something has elapsed in this um period of time. But I think that that's like, I was a film scholar when I was an academic, and so I think that that kind of durational thing is very much like kind of related to my interest in film. And it's like literally like really, I think of poems as suites of sequences. And I cannot write a one-off poem. Like it does not happen. It's like if I write one poem, I'm writing 10. So I'm like kind of like, wow, it was so cool to be able to write like a coherent one poem that still gives you a world. Because I'm like, a world is built in like 10 sequences.
And I think that comes back to Stephen, your question about semiotics a little bit, right? Like how we name the things and how we refer to the things. There's something really interesting about investigating what that looks like. I feel very invested in disconnecting how we name a thing and call a thing what it is. And so having a lot of things and disconnecting the way we jumble them together is just a game of deconstructing dream from reality, in my opinion. But this way of thinking about a poem in 10 suites or in 10 parts, that's kind of like the flip side of that impulse. And I love how our stuff worked against each other, alongside each other. So.
Mhm.
Disconnecting always sets the stage for reconnecting, right? And you're disconnecting with a certain frame that says these things don't belong together, but that's another kind of organizational. So I was thinking about what Ron Silliman would said about his poem. That he's like you're on a bus in the city, right? And you're just going through these neighborhoods. I was thinking about the Q88 or the Q4, there's the buses I used to take in Queens, and with your work, and it's all the same. It's all one street, it's all one borough, it's all one world, but the perspective and what you're seeing is changing, and depending upon what kind of durational frame you're going to put on it, there are, here's a gas station, here's a gas station, here's, there are repetitions and there are patterns that emerge, but or don't, depending upon what kind of chronology and how close or how far away you're looking. And I did see that in both, and that was really cool.
And also in like how we connect with each other's sort of frameworks of reference too, because you guys are mentioning Queens, and it makes me excited because my niece was born when my sister was living in Queens. My sister was at Elmhurst Hospital doing her medical training, and
I
so
was born there. I was born at Elmhurst Hospital.
that's so cool. So like my brain automatically goes to these places of like joy and happiness from seeing my niece born there, but also me getting lost in New York because I got lost when I went there and didn't have a cell phone, and that was interesting. And then the pandemic, which was, through Elmhurst Hospital. So like I have such different, I hear you guys say the names, and then I have such different references for the same names. So Tenny, I think you had.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of link up I think it was Laura who talked about the your poems as being full of stuff, and I thought both your poems were full of a lot of stuff, and I wanted to link that up to the musical issue. And for me, the music in your poems are very different from one another, but they're quite clotted, which for me is like a positive term. And I remember Kenneth Cook used to say he loved reading early Whitman aloud because it made you feel like you have rocks in your mouth. And I mean, the music's not like Whitman, but it's very, it's full syncopated and clotted and all that. And the other link I wanted to make, and maybe it's just because I'm thinking about stuff like this, but I had a real feeling in different ways in each of your poems that there's a kind of continuity between the body and the world in a way in which the space around you is experienced as itself a kind of body of which your own sense of your own body is part in some way. So there was something kind of organic and difficult and problematic and visceral about the sense of embodied space around you and its connection to your own sensorium and kinetics and all that. So I don't know if that is something that either or both of you could speak to, but
Yeah, I actually have a lot to say about that, which I won't say all the things I have to say about it, but like I am really, I mean, it's almost like a cliche to like sort of be like writing from the body or whatever, like it almost doesn't mean anything because we all write from bodies. It's true. But I think for me, one of like the seed of this book, and I mean, it's true of like a lot of my writing, but but like really this book, was sort of sitting down and being like, okay, what would it mean to really like write from the senses, like going really, really deep into the senses, and in the end, I feel like it's kind of in the background of the book. Like it's not necessary. It ends up not being like as thematized because there's other kind of narratives that sort of go to the front. But I think I'm really interested in visceral writing. Like a lot of my favorite writers are like visceral writers. And so yeah, to me, there's just like something really, there's like a really exciting challenge, like in writing from the body.
yeah, I mean, it's not like it, but there's a weird connection to something like Burroughs in Armies of the Red Knight or something. I mean, no, thank you. That's good. That's great. And I love this. You're saying too that you don't need to thematize it, that it's carrying it without having to be stated. That's
Well,
good.
yeah, it just ends up being, I mean, I guess the thing is that it started as a theme and then it became a method. Like I read the first two sections, which are like sort of someone that read it called it like intro to phenomenology for smart high school girls, which it is actually like it takes a lot of sort of canonical Western philosophy and like chops it up and mixes it with my own language. And it's sort of like talking back to these philosophers. But obviously like so it's like in the first section it is really like sort of explicitly thinking about that, and then it just really is not that anymore, and it's narrative and it's other things. And at first the struggle is like, oh my god, like I'm not writing about writing from the body anymore. And then it was like, no, you can actually just like tell a story now, like you've set the stage, you can tell a story.
It reminds me too of Leslie Scalapino's work in that respect.
Oh yeah, and I mean like I'm like the front matter Dead Souls is like it's like absolutely a canonical book for me. I mean like the women language poets are like, and I mean I have a complicated relationship to language poetry, but like Scalapino and Heginian and all those people are like really deep for me. And so I think there's a very like language, I mean it's different, but there's like a little bit of a language element in there.
Mhm.
Laura, I like when you talked about the census and because you earlier before you started reading, you said your work is autobiographical. And I think of most autobiographical work is almost kind of partially stepping outside and looking at and telling the story. But I felt like yours was from the inside,
Yeah.
sensing things as you come to them, and that lent it a kind of collage like thing too. And I love the way you problematize what autobiography might be.
Oh yeah, thank you. That's actually like really, that's very insightful and helps me think about, that really helps me think about my work in the future. But yeah, I mean, I think to me, there's something really interesting about like going into the body as a way of like, rather than saying like, I am a subject, I am this person, kind of dissolving the subject a little bit. Like I'm really, it sounds like insanely pretentious and I don't mean it this way, but I am really like interested in a little bit dissolving the subject. Partially because like I'm a bit more like, on one hand, politics are like a very real thing for me in my life and in my work. But then on the other hand, at the level of subjective experience, I'm really interested in intersubjectivity and in representing intersubjectivity and representing the places where we're not fully individuated. And I actually think that I heard like echoes of that in your work also, Saba.
I love that you brought up the concept of being individuated. You know, that to me is really interesting. It comes back to Tenny's question about bodies as well. Like, I'm very interested in how bodies, how energies resonate in and around and between bodies. Like, I'm very,
Yeah, yeah.
I struggle with being in my body all the time. Like sometimes I'm
Mhm.
just in my head and sometimes I'm not at all in my head. And sometimes I just think I'm a disembodied being who's just temporarily inhabiting a body. That's just how
Mhm.
I feel about being in the world. So I feel like I'm always looking for ways to be more rooted, which makes me think of the world that we live in and all the bodies of the things that are alive around us. And um, often plants, which just get so ignored. Animals, which at least we think about and talk about sometimes, but just motion, movement, life is so much more than just like what we can use, what we can turn something into, what we can exploit. And power speaks to just what we can exploit and negates all the rest. And so we want to like speak to speak to the rest, I guess.
Well, that's a curious play in geometry too. If you have rootedness, which is that vertical axis, and we're talking before about disaggregation and kind of endlessly extending along a horizontal or along a, an infinite plane going in all different directions. And I mean, that maybe is just too facile or too reductive a way to read, but I think that's a really potent. If my own work too, I mean, I always come back to, which way am I going, up and down, or is it this way and now? And the word autobiography is a strange word too, because it's really three words, right? Self, life, and writing kind of, squished together, and it needs to be broken up. It really does want to be where the spaces where those where the three terms come together and don't quite come together is a great place to be writing from.
And it's an autobiography is such an interesting thing too, because like it really contends with notions of what is truth sometimes. Like, what is truth in this moment is not what is truth in the next moment or the past moment as well. And there's just echoes there.
How many could one write in a lifetime? Right? It could be dozens of biographies written by somebody else, but how many can you write in? Is it just one, or is it, each moment is its own autobiography?
There's also just like the difference between like, you can tell sort of a story about your life or about someone's life, but does it get at the truth of their existence? That's, to me, that's like a sort of like existential question in writing. And just like also living in an age of like just truth being so like, undermined in various ways. And so people being like, no, there's subjective truth. And it's like there is and there isn't. And so it's this kind of like, I feel like you can do that complexity in writing in a way that you can't in like the news or in, somewhat in real life. Like, yeah.
That's why AI is so terrifying, right? Because it's getting
Yeah.
better. Yeah, at doing that for us.
John.
And like thank you again for these wonderful readings. And I really, really thank you again. And I really, of course, see in the readings, how much reading you're doing in the midst of the writing. And so I'm just curious if you'd like to talk more about what you were reading around, or what was around you that you were reading in the making of these poems, and or discuss what you're reading right now and the things that are exciting you that you're reading. What's your reading right now? And I have my notes, so I'll take. I want homework.
That's always an interesting question to me. I love reading things and I love reading multiple things at the same time. And so the poems that I read from, they came from a lot of different time periods. When I'm writing a manuscript, I take a very, very long time to do it. And so I'll write many, many things and then cull and cull and cull until I find the things that are connected. But what I read from, I was just reading about technology and ancient technologies in specific. So that's where a lot of that conversation came from for me. I was when I finished my PhD at USC, I focused on science and poetry. So how those things are connected specifically. And I was looking at AI. So this is a long time ago now, but I was looking at AI and how AI is connected to language and what we do with language. So I was actually reading a lot of like robotics stuff and things that don't have anything to do with, well, they do and don't have anything to do with the humanities, but technical things, and trying to make sense of a lot of those different elements. These days, what I'm reading a lot of is folklore. Specifically folklore about fairies, because the project I'm working on right now, I know it's not Tinkerbell fairies, but I'm working specifically on a project that's like kind of an ecofeminist fable. So I'm looking at how fairy lore in Ireland sort of really functions, and what fairy lore and things like fairy lore look like in different parts of the world as well. So fairy stories, djinn stories, selkie stories, etc. So when I research for any particular poem or project, I try to branch out kind of rhizomatically. Like, I don't know, I'm very mushroom like, I guess. In that way, I just sort of branch out and pull in all the things I can. And I love taking notes. I take notes and notes all day long. I can just live in notebooks. And so I think those parts just sort of live in my head. So I could always give you like a biography of stuff, or a bibliography of stuff I've been reading, but I never know when it's going to come back to what I'm working on. But the ones that I read from, I'd say I was reading a lot of technical documents, which is not what I gravitate towards for pleasure necessarily, but is what informed what I was working on in that moment. So, Laura?
I'm trying to remember what I was reading when I was working on Making Water. Like I was reading a lot of film theory because I was writing my dissertation. So I was reading like kind of theorists of film and embodiment, like Vivian Sobchak, who wrote a beautiful book called The Scene of the Screen, which is like a book that I'm like completely obsessed with. So there was this kind of academic part, which felt like, I mean, I don't know, it's supposed to be like a buried element. I don't want it to be, obvious in the book, but that was actually a lot of what I was reading at the time. And then just sort of like, I think I work very much like Saba in the sense that I will just sort of aggregate tons of things from like over the years. And so I think a lot of my process was sort of like going over notebooks and being like, oh, this is a bit of language I'm going to use, or, oh, this is like a fragment of a memory that this triggers this, or, oh, this is like a quote I wrote down, and then sort of like going through that. And it's, it's pretty, it just is sort of like all over the place in terms of like stuff that kind of inspired me to write it. But now I'm working on a project called Burning Sequence, which I I didn't read tonight because I'm kind of putting it aside, but it's a follow-up to Making Water, and it's somewhat about like New York at around 9/11, and it's partially about 9/11. So I've been reading like a lot of 9/11 conspiracy theory stuff, and I'm just really like interested, and just a lot of stuff about 9/11. I'm really interested in that, and both like sort of popular stuff, and like, I mean, when I say conspiracy stuff, I really mean like conspiracy stuff. And so I think one major facet of my writing process is that I'll sort of get fixated on a kind of random body of literature that's not even like necessarily literary. It'll be like film theory or conspiracy theories, and then I'll just sort of, that will end up helping me kind of set the method, and then I end up just going, like Saba, going back a long ways through a lot of different stuff. And then right now, just in the moment on my desk, I'm reading Juliana Huxtable's Mucus in My Pineal Gland, which I'm really enjoying.
Sounds like a cool title.
It's a really cool book. It's like a beautiful, it's a beautiful object, and really interesting.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Sorry I didn't have more references, but I feel like I want to think of some and like send him or something.
You can call him later.
Post it in the chat.
That would be a really neat addition to our website if everybody who read made a list of, the 50 things they were reading. We have this archive, for all of us to read, so.
Yeah, it's related to me. I know Cynthia's been talking to me for a couple of years that we should have a POG event, or even all of us who are part of POG should kind of talk about our maps of who we are and why we're here in reading, but maybe listening and music and other things too. Kind of
Your lineage.
which is daunting to think of doing it, but it's really great too. And this conversation shows me it could be, it doesn't have to be daunting. Thank you both so much. I think probably a week or so, maybe less, this will be on our YouTube station, and I did put that YouTube channel in the chat.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Saba.
Thanks all you guys for being here too and being in conversation. It's been a really great evening. So,
It's a terrific reading. Thanks so much to both of you. It's absolutely stupendous. Yeah. It's great.
Thank you.
So
Have a
I guess
good
we'll
night.
officially end it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Good night. Enjoy the moon.
Good night, all.